We are back. We're talking about Just War round 3, right? Isn't that what this
round
is?
3 of 3. Ding, 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 ding.
This is Anchored and Devoted. I'm Pastor Joseph, and this is...
I'm Pastor Jair. Hey, guys.
How about that? We are here, two under shepherds. I'm always calling them sheepdogs. I know a lot of pastors that don't like that. I don't really care. But we take our cues from the head shepherd, who is, our Lord and Savior. And so for me, I don't want to view myself as above, which is often, how most pastors view themselves. I see myself as a sheep, just like everybody else. I got fleas. I'm slow to move. I'm stubborn. And so with that in mind, we decided, try and wrap up a topic that is not light and not easy. So we hope you're having a great day, and know that there'll probably be a whole lot of stuff we don't cover that you're hoping we catch in the last episode. Sorry, please send us a note so maybe we can do a fourth, but that's not the plan.
That's right.
So we'll see what comes in. We'd love to have the conversation with you. Know that you can even leave a message through Spotify and through Anchor. So we can get that and even play that in one of the episodes if we do get some really good questions.
Yeah, that's right.
So Just War. Where did we leave off? Trying to remember.
We left off with a lot more questions than we had answers. We looked a little bit at the historic. We looked a little bit at the biblical mandate to love. And, we looked at the reality that the image of God in all of humanity is the underpinning of the dignity that we have to hold on to. We have to guard that. We have to preserve it. Mm-hmm. And as we talk about just war theory, as we talk about when it's okay, and this is really what it boils down to, how do I respond to someone when they have encroached on a boundary in an inappropriate way? Mm-hmm. What's my response? How do I determine my response? Understanding that this person is someone who has dignity because they are made in God's image. Right. And as an image bearer of God, I have to also respond out of my dignity in light of their dignity. Otherwise, essentially this is what puts us out of bounds. When we either violate our own dignity by responding like a beast, or ignore someone else's dignity, treating them as if they are a beast, we're stepping outside the bounds. So,
okay. So I will try and give us, the end before the beginning. So that way we at least hit something, and I can say we did something.
We have landed this plane.
We at least landed it before we wandered down some lane. Your intro, I think, captured much of what we need to understand to define a just war. First, there must be a just cause, as you stated, and just being the recognition. When we talk about justice, there being an imbalance, and we're trying to rectify something. So this cause requires us to address it. This cause makes war the last resort. This cause recognizes that in war, life will be lost. And as a part of this, those in authority, and we can talk about what that means, because you are an authority in your house, you're an authority in the community, whether you're a mayor, a governor, the president, but there must be the proper authority recognizing the first two things, but also understanding that the intentions of the other, the person that is attacking or disabling or terrorizing, their intentions are not able to be addressed peacefully. There's no way to negotiate. There's no way to have a conversation. So now we're in the place where reasonableness has failed, but yet there is a chance to succeed when it comes to a just war. Understand?
So let me hit your pause there, okay? There is a chance to succeed, but we haven't even defined that. In the context of what you're saying now, I think it's really important to say the purpose of war is to bring about peace, not to bring about recompense, not to bring about retribution or gain. The purpose of a just war is so that peace can be established. that's always the goal when you're at this place that you're describing, where reason can no longer be used, where discussion is no longer possible. Okay, if we have to go to fisticuffs, the reason that we're doing this now is so that there can once again be peace. And that doesn't mean that you're no longer here.
Correct.
That means that whatever has happened, whatever you've encroached on, I've responded in such a way that you recognize this is not okay. I cannot do this. I will choose to stop.
Correct. I've tried.
If you haven't chosen to stop before I kill you, then the peace does come at the expense of your life. But that's a choice you willingly stepped into as the aggressor.
Correct. So whenever we talk about just war, we must understand that we've tried everything first, as well as we continue to try throughout it. So example, in Ukraine, where war continues, you have a carrot and stick approach of, yes, we are leaving the opportunity at any point to come to an end with the war. And on the flip side, I'm not going to stop pounding you in a way, let's be clear about this, that is proportional to what's being done. So this is one of the tough things about just war, as opposed to overwhelming. And we can talk about different types of war. An overwhelming one is where you say, okay, you know what, Ukraine, you get to own Russia for what they took. And that's not what we're talking about when we talk about a just war. We're talking about the life that's been lost, the damage to farms and hospitals, as well as the people and the mental health issues that will come out of this. Those things cry out for a response, and the other party is not willing to engage so that we can get to a place of peace, as you stated. Now, understand when it comes to a just war, and I think this is what stalled most people in the very beginning, is that most people view Ukraine not as having a chance, a reasonable chance of success when it came to Russia. They expected everything to be done within 24 hours, maybe 72 hours, but definitely not at the point where we are right now, 100 days. And while we're recording this, today's June 3rd, it's been 100 days. And it's clear that the people of Ukraine from the top down are looking not to be unjust, again, and to penalize people who have never stepped a foot on their property, again, taking over Russia or some other space. They're looking for what they had prior to the war taking place, with the understanding there must be a cost assigned to the lives lost, the destruction that has occurred. And therefore you say, okay, that is justice. It won't be full, because we know that there's a spiritual side, but justice requires this reconciliation. And that's part of a just war. As you stated, okay. That's part of getting back to peace. It isn't just, okay, 20% of the country belongs to Russia. We stop. Okay, we're done. Well, there was no redress for the wrongs that occurred.
So is that kind of where you're landing this there, with the redress package or the redress part here? Help me understand where you're landing this before we get sidetracked here.
Well, for me, I just wanted to make sure, when I think of just wars, but I think of 7 to 12 things, and I kind of just put them all in one moment right now. Of what is required. If tanks are rolling through the street and there is no way to win, then we're talking about killing an image bearer of God, and knowing that God can work even in the falling of a country. No, we don't want it, but there is the understanding that we're not going to win. This is
right.
This is a lost sacrifice.
Right.
The spiritual side is, if God is calling you to make that sacrifice, then you need to rise up. That's the tough part on the individual level. But know that the last part of just war does require a reconciliation, a recognition of the loss, and a seek to balance the scales. That is, just wars are fought to to hmm, to redress a wrong that has been suffered. It is more, as we talked before, this is more self-defense against someone who has armed themselves to attack without cause.
Okay. So here's where I want to jump off. Because we've talked about application practically, but in big terms. I want to pull down to the small level and talk about just war theory as I teach my kids. Because I don't teach my kids just war theory. I teach them how to essentially playground rules, which we've talked about.
Right. And
due to other...
We talked about this outside of the podcast. I wanted you to share your playground rules that you've given with
me. Which to be fair, are not mine. I received these playground rules called the Rules of Fighting from a friend of ours. Shout out to Elisha, not Alicia, not Alyssa, Elisha. Just like the prophet, still a guy. Anyway, but these apply to the playground. They apply to my kids. They're what I intrinsically held myself to before I had a label for these. When I was in college and I was studying martial arts, when I teach my kids how to interact on the playground. And it starts with, do to others as you want them to do to you. Don't steal. Don't start a fight. Don't be mean. Don't be a bully. Don't take what doesn't belong to you. Ask, get permission, all those kind of things. Just manners, the boundary of manners. But once that's out of their hands, there are 3 rules that I've taught my kids. Rule number 1 is if you can walk away, walk away. And I'll go through the rules real quickly here. Rule number 2, if you can't walk away, you have to determine, I mean, not if you in your physical constitution, in your mental constitution, if you in fact cannot walk away because you are backed into a corner where you cannot escape, then you have to determine, and the phrase here is the juice worth the squeeze? Meaning, is what's going to result of you engaging in physical combat worth whatever has been done? The question here is, would it be better for you to simply curl up in the ground, take a little beating, know that you can get up and walk away and things will be okay? Now, with both of these are both a hit to our pride.
Correct.
Because you and I are both big guys. We can walk away, but we don't need to. We can take a beating, but why should I? Both of these strike at my own sense of dignity. I shouldn't have to run away from this person. They're being the aggressor. I shouldn't have to take a beating. They're wrong. I'm right. Justice demands that they get what's coming to them, and I want to give it to them with both sides of the law.
That is the key right there. I feel in my own hubris that I can meter out justice, that I can hold revenge. I was listening to a book, just a quick rabbit trail, and in the book, the main antagonist said, "Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord." And this was fun because the protagonist said, "Well, I will give vengeance back when I'm done with it." Because and it was just like, wow. He was, and I say, he was wrestling with harm that had been done to his family in the past over generations, and he wanted to get revenge to the point of destroying, in a way, carpet bombing the life of someone else's. It's hard to walk away. It's hard to take the hit. It's hard to let someone call you names, just as it is to strike you. But I think this rule of being smart, to think through, is the juice worth the squeeze? Is this something that I'm willing to fight over, or is this not? Is important? Yeah. And often we get into fights that just aren't worth it at all.
Yes.
They're
Example, you're driving down the road and someone cuts you off, flips you the bird, and starts screaming at your wife. Does that cross boundaries? Without question, it does. Is it wrong both legally and morally? Yes, it is. Do you have a right to want to respond? And would you be within your rights to respond? Yes, but only within certain boundaries. And if you decide to respond, what you're doing, and Proverbs 15:3 talks to this, when you answer fire with fuel, it does not make the fire lessen. Harsh words will stir up anger. So if this motorist is yelling at your wife and you start yelling back, you're engaging, you're not walking away, you're not simply taking it. You're saying, no, I'm going to answer kind with kind. They're using words, I'm going to use words. And what happens then is it escalates. And again, the purpose in all of this is not just to bring about justice, but it's to bring about peace. And ultimately, peace means reconciliation. So the first, there's the practical application on the playground. There is the rules of the road, but then there's also for nations. And so I moved through 1, if you can walk away, walk away. 2, if you can't walk away, determine is the juice worth the squeeze. And number 3, if you've answered number 1 and 2, and the answer is I cannot walk away, the juice is worth the squeeze, is something that I should be engaging in. Then 3, do as much damage as necessary to end the fight as quickly as possible. I'll say that one again because this one, it still takes me a while to wrap my head around it sometimes. Do as much damage as is necessary to end the fight as quickly as possible. This goes against some feelings I had growing up where if I have to fight, I want to do as little damage as necessary to end the fight. But that is, as I've worked through this myself, again, the purpose here is we've already passed these things. When I was studying martial arts, and you may have had a similar experience when you were in the Navy, or possibly even, when you were doing sports. If it came to a point in my life where because of what was going on, I had to enter into physical combat, it was because I was convinced by that point that either I or someone near me would be killed if I did not. If I'm at that point, it is stupid for me to enter into that saying, I'm going to do as little damage as possible to end this. No, I'm going to go in as hard and as fast as I possibly can to get this done. Because the purpose, again, is to get back to peace, not to keep from harming the other person. At this point, that's off the table. At this point now, your harm is my goal, and I'm going to bring as much, as hard, as fast, as violent as I can to end this as quickly as possible. What are your thoughts on that, Dave? Does that go against everything that Christ has taught us?
The turning the other cheek is where you started. The recognition that in the turning the other cheek, there must be a continual relationship with God. There must be the conversation with God. The juice versus the squeeze, understanding clearly your space in time, in relationship to others, is one where if I am genuinely other focused and I am going to hurt with them, laugh with them, sing with them and dance with them, as well as fight with them and fight for them, then it becomes something that is not as self-centered as it sounds. And I think that's my goal, is to clear it up some. Like, it sounds as though it's a me versus the world kind of thing, when it really is
right,
still built on relationship with God and relationship with others. The last part of being able to rise up, to challenge the darkness, to challenge wickedness, to challenge those that desire to harm others, is something we see all throughout Scripture. And we also know, because the rapture hasn't occurred, that there's still more to do. The reality is as we pray for Christ's return, we still have to actively serve others, believers and non-believers, or believers and future believers, or some will, never choose to change, just as we stated in other podcasts. Some are created to be wicked, just as some are created for a good purpose. If God has placed us in that position to be his hands and feet, yes, we want to do it in a way, at least we typically think of the hands and feet as there for the hugging and for the feeding,
the consoling, the comfort. Yeah,
correct. But also know that when it comes to love, Jesus made it clear that part of love is correcting. And so that's where we are in the conversation. This third stage is where justice requires us to correct. This isn't and
that doesn't mean to punish. When you say correct, you don't mean to punish a person for what they did. You mean the person has reached a boundary, and I now have to reestablish this boundary.
Correct. This is understanding that, yes, I am called to be a living sacrifice. That does not mean I'm called to be a living doormat. There's a big difference. There's a big difference between being humble, as the movies show it, and then biblical humility. Biblical humility isn't weakness for the sake of others feeling comfortable. Biblical humility is recognizing and obeying the commands that we've been given, following the Spirit of God moment by moment, and allowing others to feel that, which often feels comforting when others are hurting and uncomfortable when people feel safe. And so, for our culture, when we look across the seas or in other places, or even in other communities that are not ours or don't look like us, we have to understand, if I'm comfortable, I'm probably being called to get uncomfortable. Just as if things are uncomfortable, I'm probably being called to console others, because my life is not the main thing. Example, if I'm in Ukraine serving, whether it's feeding meals or delivering packages, or I'm a Ukrainian and I'm trying to help others, know that I'm not so much worried about my physical self, because I know where I'm going. I know whose I am. I had the chance to go on a missions trip. I was looking at a calendar not too long ago, and it's been, I think, 13 years. Went to Israel. And while we were there, bombs were being dropped to the north and to the south while we were on this missions trip. It didn't worry us one bit. We prayed, but then we went about our day and we did the work we were called to do. Again, that's the difference. There's an understanding that I'm called to move and be an agent of change. And so when it comes to just war, it really shouldn't be, as you stated, just theory, but it should be a life that is filled with seeking justice for others, because we know that we have the Prince of Peace. Like, we actually have peace. And we want others to experience what we have.
I don't remember where exactly the verse is, but it says, righteousness and mercy have kissed. They met, they have become entwined. As we're discussing this, what stands out to me as foundational is that we are not responsible. We are not ultimately responsible for meting out justice. And because of that, we are not primarily and ultimately responsible for our own safety. We are under the care, under the hand, and the provision and the providence of God, both when we respond to someone who has broken that boundary, and as we are in the process of determining how do I respond? Whether I move from question 2 to question 3 is still done with the understanding that I am both under God's protection, even while I'm taking this beating. Even as I decide it is now time for me to respond aggressively, I am still under God's protection ultimately. And ultimately, He is the one who's going to bring about justice, not my actions here. My actions here are about establishing a boundary. And secondly, this is going towards the goal of peace, not just a cessation of hostility, but reconciliation, such that we see this after World War II. We drop 2 A-bombs on Japan, and then for decades, we're helping the country rebuild and establishing friendly relationships to help them, to aid them for their good. We did the same thing with Germany. As an interesting aside, the only country that we didn't do that with was our allies, quote unquote, in the USSR. It was Russia at the time, USSR, et cetera, et cetera. You see this in the training that law enforcement receives. When deadly force needs to be applied, as soon as the threat has been stopped, the very next step is to then bring aid. And that means that an officer who shoots an assailant, as soon as the assailant is stopped, the officer's responsibility is to put the weapon away, pull out the rubber gloves, and start rendering life-saving aid and assistance. The same is true when I'm on the playground. If a kid's stolen my lunch, as soon as the threat's been stopped, my responsibility now is to say, hey, what you did was totally wrong, but I happen to have some extra goldfish, and you seem hungry. I'd rather just share with you. Would you like some? Because again, the purpose is that righteousness and mercy would meet. It applies across all these levels, but it's a way of thinking that requires us to put ourselves into the hands of a loving God. Because only in the hands of a loving God can I sit here and say, well, you know what? I don't deserve this, but I'm just going to walk away. I'm going to lay down the right that I have to respond. Or I don't deserve this and this hurts, but I would rather this simply hurt me than that I have to inflict pain on someone else to stop this, because I know I'll be okay. This will be okay. In 5 years, in 10 years, this is going to be, yes, sucky thing happened, but you know what? So what? Water under the bridge. And if I have to bring force, if I get to that third stage, again, it's overwhelming force, because what I want you as the assailant to know is this is not okay. I've been trying to stop from hurting you all this time. Now, the reason I'm bringing this overwhelming force is so that you recognize if you don't stop, ultimately, this is going to demonstrate hurt to you. And I don't want to do that. But if you leave me no choice, this is what you have to look forward to. Now, you and I, because we're big guys, we don't typically have to get to that third phase. People can look at us and they can recognize the overwhelming force that would be coming. And that's enough to stop them. But, that's not the case for other individuals. That's certainly not the case for groups of people, whether they are local groups of people, cultures, or entire nations that are looked down upon as being weak, as being undeserving, as being undignified. And so these have to be, what we're talking about here is something that as a Christian, we need to work through, we need to hold ourselves to, and then we need to be willing to walk out in trusting God. Not just from the theoretical, but from the practical. Whether it's lunches, bullying on the playground, road rage, defending our community, our house, or standing up for what is just in the world around us, both in our backyard and across the world's ponds. I have found that this is a good lens through which to evaluate how ought I to respond now. Is this calling for my action now? Or is this calling for more consideration, more patience, more meekness? Because as you said, humility is not a lack of strength. Humility, meekness is strength under control. And the way that we see that best demonstrated is when the strong are able to choose to abide the suffering for the sake of those who are weaker. And sometimes that looks like taking a beating from someone who even looks bigger than you. And sometimes it means, now it's time for the gloves to come off. Now it's time for me to throw it down. I'm sorry to have to do this, and I'll pick you up if you're still here to be picked up. But until you stop, we're now at war. And I wish it weren't so. But you've left me no alternative.
Well, I think we did it. I think we did a good episode.
Can't accuse us of being war hawks.
Well, your verse was Psalms 85, 10 through 11. Mercy and truth are met together. Righteousness and peace have kissed each other. Truth shall spring out of the earth, and righteousness shall look down from heaven.
Lord, let it be. The reason that we have tackled this conversation is because it is our prayer that what you just read, Dave, would be realized by every person, every tongue, every nation. Ultimately, that will happen because Christ will return. And when he does return, it will be with a sword. But it will be with a sword so that peace may spring out of the earth. I would rather see us come to that point. He's already determined that he can't walk away. He's already determined and taken the beating. When he does come back next, it will be to fight. And I'd rather us respond to him before he has to do that, because he's still calling for peace.
Well, thanks for listening to us. I look forward to catching you in the next episode. Please share. Please send us some more questions. And we'll be praying for you all. Send us some prayer requests. Have a blessed one. Bye-bye.
See you guys.